Never again. Chapter 1. Dr. Adrian Cole stepped out of his Subaru, the gravel crunching beneath his polished shoes. The early morning mist clung to the hills surrounding the town of Oak Ridge, and the scent of pine trees welcomed him more kindly than any person had since he left Boston. He glanced at the faded wooden sign above the clinic, Oak Ridge Community Health Center. Modest, rustic, and a far cry from the gleaming corridors of his old hospital. But that was exactly what he needed. Distance. From the past, from the heartbreak, and especially from women in scrubs. He flexed his shoulders, tugged his briefcase from the back seat, and took a deep breath. A new start. No drama, no nurses. The receptionist barely glanced up as he entered, too busy laughing with someone at the counter. The laughter belonged to a woman with hair the color of roasted chestnuts and eyes sharp enough to slice through surgical steel. She turned toward him, her smile evaporating the moment she saw his white coat. "You must be Dr. Cole," she said. Her voice was even, polite, but missing any warmth. "I'm Nurse Amy Whitaker. Welcome to Oak Ridge." Adrian nodded, trying to ignore the pang in his chest. Something about her confidence, the way she held herself, reminded him of Natalie. But unlike Natalie, Amy didn't seem interested in impressing him. "Pleasure," he said, offering a hand. She shook it once, firmly, then turned to grab a clipboard. "Your orientation starts in 15 minutes. I'll show you around." He followed her down the hallway, noting how every nurse, patient, and janitor greeted her like family. She had the kind of presence that made people straighten their backs, speak more respectfully. That kind of respect wasn't earned easily, especially not in small towns. Adrian knew this. He also knew he'd have to earn his own way, and quickly. "Let's get one thing clear," Amy said as they stepped into the staff room. "I know you're the new hotshot from the city, but this place doesn't run on egos. It runs on teamwork. The last doctor we had thought he was too good to empty a bedpan. Don't be that guy." He blinked, surprised at her bluntness. "Understood. I'm not here to make enemies." "Good," she said, and then looked him straight in the eye. "But I'm also not here to be impressed." If she meant to intimidate him, she did a pretty good job. Adrian had faced down cardiac arrests with less tension. By midday, Adrian had seen 4 patients, each one more suspicious than the last. They asked about his credentials, his age, why he left Boston, and whether he could treat a goat bite. When he offered advice, they looked to Amy for confirmation. "The doctor's right, Henry," she said to one particularly skeptical elderly man who finally left the room. She turned to Adrian. "You might want to smile more. You look like you're delivering eulogies." "I'm used to patients who don't question every move. And I'm used to doctors who assume patients shouldn't." They stared at each other for a moment, the air thick between them. "You've been here a long time?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. 5 years. Came here for a 2-week temp job and never left. The people are good. They just need to know you care." He nodded, realizing just how uphill his climb would be. That evening, he stayed behind to finish some charts. Amy reappeared around 6, her braid looser now, her scrubs slightly rumpled. "You don't have to stay late. The internet's slow after 5 anyway," she said. "Just trying to catch up. I feel like I'm already a few steps behind." Amy leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "It's not a race, it's trust. You'll either build it or you won't." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched her, noticed the way she rubbed her knuckles absent-mindedly, like she'd had a long day lifting, moving, caring. The kind of hard work that never showed up on resumes. "You really love it here," he said. "Of course I do. People matter here, not titles, not who went to Harvard, just who shows up." He looked down, chastened. "Noted." She turned to go, but then paused. "Just so you know, I don't date doctors." He looked up surprised. Good, I don't date nurses. Her eyes sparkled briefly. Was that amusement? Before she walked away. As the door closed behind her, Adrian sighed. This town was going to be more complicated than he thought. But for the first time in months, he felt something unfamiliar at the edges of his chest. Not affection, not attraction, not yet. Hope. The next day, Adrian brought coffee, a peace offering. From that cafe down the road, he said, holding out a cup. You take it with cream and 1 sugar, right? Amy raised an eyebrow. Been asking around about me, doctor? Let's call it due diligence. She took the cup cautiously, sipped, didn't smile, but didn't frown either. Not bad. I'll take that as a win. She glanced at him. Don't push your luck. But as she turned away, he caught the faintest trace of a smile curling her lips. Weeks passed. He learned to say hello to Old Man Ridley before trying to take his blood pressure. He discovered that the clinic's power flickered every Thursday afternoon and that Amy could change an IV faster than most ER nurses he'd worked with. He also learned how not to stare too long when Amy laughed, how to check himself when her arm brushed his in the cramped hallway. She noticed, too. Once, when he reached for a syringe at the same time she did, their hands touched. She pulled back fast, muttering something about sterility. Another time, he complimented her wound dressing skills, and she looked at him like he'd confessed to a felony. The tension was like a live wire running under every word, every glance, but neither of them said a thing. Then came the storm. A freak thunderstorm rolled in one Thursday night, knocking out power across half the county. Emergency calls poured in. Amy and Adrian were the only ones at the clinic when a mother brought in her feverish toddler, shivering and limp. Amy was already running a cool sponge across the child's forehead. I'll prep the antipyretic. They worked together in perfect synchrony. No hesitation, no second guessing. After an hour, the child was sleeping, fever breaking. The mother hugged them both. Adrian and Amy exchanged a look, something unspoken passing between them. Later, as they sat in the dim glow of the backup lights, Adrian looked at her. You were amazing. Don't say it like you're surprised. I'm not. I'm just... She cut him off. Let's not do this. Do what? But his voice was quieter now, less sure. She stood. Exactly. So let's keep it simple. We work well together, that's all. He nodded slowly. But as she walked away, he realized how badly he wanted to make her turn back. Adrian had come to Oak Ridge to heal, to rebuild. But he hadn't expected the sharp pull in his chest every time Amy walked into the room. He hadn't anticipated how her voice would settle into the quiet of his evenings, echoing in memory. He'd sworn off nurses, and yet every day he watched Amy with growing admiration, her quiet strength, her sharp wit, the kindness she buried beneath sarcasm. And Amy? She'd sworn off doctors. But Adrian wasn't like the others. He listened. He worked hard. He never once implied she was beneath him. Still, feelings were dangerous, and they had rules. But rules are funny things, especially in small towns where hearts have space to grow, even when you try not to let them, even when you know better, especially then. Chapter 2. The Saturday morning sun filtered through the clinic's break room blinds, casting golden slats of light across the linoleum floor. Adrian sipped his coffee, black, bitter, and his fourth cup. Sleep had eluded him the night before, a casualty of too many thoughts about a certain nurse with fiery hair and a bite in her voice. He leaned against the counter, eyes closed, willing himself to focus on work. Charts to review. A community wellness event to prepare for. anything but the feel of Amy's hand brushing his during the storm, or the way her voice had softened when she said, "Let's not do this." "You planning to hog the coffee machine all day, Dr. City?" Adrian opened one eye. Amy stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk pulling at her lips. "Dr. City?" She shrugged. "You haven't earned a local nickname yet. That's the best I've got until you prove you can gut a fish or survive a barn dance. I'll start practicing my square dancing immediately." She rolled her eyes, moving past him to pour her own coffee. "Big day today. The town's health fair starts at noon. You ready to meet the rest of Oak Ridge?" "I've been studying small-town dialects and farming metaphors." "You'll need them, especially if you want to win over the Johnson twins. They're 6 and already know how to castrate a bull." He winced. "Duly noted." Amy sipped her coffee, eyes scanning him briefly. "You might want to loosen up a little. You look like you're going to a deposition." "It's just, I want to make a good impression." "Then don't try too hard. Just be present. Be human." He looked at her, wondering if she realized how much that meant coming from her. She didn't offer compliments easily, and he'd started to crave her approval more than he cared to admit. "Got it," he said. But the warmth in his chest lingered long after she walked out. The town square buzzed with life by midday. Booths lined the edges of the park, decorated with homemade signs and bunting. Kids chased each other with balloons. Old folks sat in folding chairs sipping lemonade, and the local radio station blared country hits from a makeshift stage. Adrian stood at the clinic's booth, passing out brochures and blood pressure checks. Amy worked beside him, deftly managing the crowd, laughing with patients, guiding nervous visitors through their first screenings. She wore a sleeveless dress under her white coat, and her ponytail swayed as she moved from one person to the next. Every time she smiled at someone else, Adrian's heart gave a little jolt. Which was ridiculous. This was exactly what he'd said he wouldn't do. Get involved. Get attached. "Dr. Cole!" He turned to see a teenage boy limping toward him, followed by an exasperated Amy. "He tried to jump from the top of the hay bale pyramid," she said, arms crossed. "Didn't go well." "I was trying to impress Emily." Adrian knelt down, inspecting the kid's ankle. "Well, you definitely made an impression." The boy grinned through his grimace. Adrian wrapped the ankle and gave him instructions to rest. As the boy hobbled off, Amy leaned in. "Not bad. Thanks. I have years of experience dealing with adolescent bravado. And yet you still don't smile enough." He arched a brow. "You keep track of that?" "Only because it's impressive how consistent you are." He chuckled. "Is that almost a compliment?" "Don't let it go to your head." But she was smiling as she said it. Later that afternoon, the fair began to wind down. Adrian wandered away from the booth, hoping for a moment to catch his breath. He found himself near the edge of the park, where Amy stood under a maple tree, looking out over the crowd. "Hiding?" he asked, strategically retreating. He joined her, hands in his pockets. "You were great today. You're kind of a celebrity here." "That's because I listen, and I don't act like I'm better than them." The words weren't aimed at him exactly, but he still felt the sting. "I hope you know I don't think that way, about nurses, or this town." She glanced at him. "You wouldn't be the first doctor who says that and still acts like a god in a lab coat." "I'm trying, Amy. I came here to change." "Change what?" He hesitated. "Everything. I left Boston because I made a mess. I was arrogant, cold. I let work define me, and I hurt someone because of it." She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment her guardedness cracked. "So did I." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, but tentative. "You don't have to tell me," he said. She shook her head. "No, you should know. I dated a doctor once. Thought he was different. Thought he respected me. Turned out I was just the nurse he could charm until someone better came along. He swallowed. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, that's why I don't do doctors. He nodded, accepting it, even as a quiet ache bloomed in his chest. We should probably get back, she said after a moment. Yeah. They walked in silence, but something between them had shifted. A door cracked open. That evening, Adrian stopped by the town diner. As he slid into a booth, the waitress, Jill, mid-40s, sharp as a tack, smiled. Dr. City, what'll it be tonight? Something with 1,000 calories and no kale. She laughed. Amy said you'd say something like that. He blinked. Amy was here? Left about 10 minutes ago. Said she had charts to finish. Girl never stops working. Adrian nodded slowly. After a beat, he stood. Actually, I'll take a rain check. Trouble digesting without her around? Jill teased. Something like that. He muttered, sorry, and headed back to the clinic. The lights were still on in the nurse's station when he arrived. He knocked gently. Amy looked up, surprised. Forget something? Yeah, dinner. Thought you might have skipped yours too. She hesitated, then motioned him in. I've got granola bars. Half a soda. Gourmet. He sat across from her, watching as she closed a folder and rubbed her eyes. You should rest. So should you. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then she said, almost too softly, sometimes I think I stay busy so I don't have to feel anything. He leaned forward. Me too. Their eyes met. This can't happen, she said. I know. But I keep thinking about it anyway. He reached across the desk, gently touching her hand. So do I. She pulled her hand back, but not harshly. More like someone touching a flame and regretting how warm it felt. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Amy. One evening, a young woman came into the clinic in labor. The ambulance was delayed by downed trees, and Adrian had to step up fast. Amy was already prepping the room, barking orders, efficient as ever. You ever delivered a baby? She asked. 2, in Boston, but I had an OB team. Well, tonight, I'm your OB team. They worked seamlessly. Amy coached the mother, Adrian monitored vitals, and after what seemed like forever, the baby arrived, red-faced and wailing. As he handed the infant to the mother, Adrian felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not exhaustion. Joy. Pure, unfiltered joy. He turned to Amy. She was flushed, radiant, tears in her eyes. You okay? He asked. She laughed, brushing her cheek. Always cry at births. It's ridiculous. It's beautiful. Their eyes locked. The baby cried louder. Amy broke the moment. Let's finish the chart. Later, they walked out into the parking lot together. The sky was clear, stars brighter than he'd ever seen in Boston. We make a good team, he said. We do. But still not dating. She looked at him conflicted. Still not dating. He nodded. Then I guess I'll just keep being your teammate. She smiled faintly. You do that. As she walked to her car, Adrian watched the stars, wondering how long he could hold a line he already wanted to cross. Because lines in the sand have a funny way of washing away, especially when hearts get involved. And his heart? It was already halfway gone. Chapter 3. The early summer rain fell in slow, steady sheets, draping the town of Oak Ridge in a veil of silver mist. It was the kind of rain that lulled everything into quiet, except inside the clinic, where the Monday rush had come in like a storm of its own. Amy moved briskly between exam rooms, her ponytail damp at the edges, her sneakers squeaking softly against the vinyl floor. She hadn't spoken more than 3 words to Adrian all morning, and each time they passed in the hallway, it was like 2 magnets of the same pole, drawn together only to push away again. But she noticed him, every moment. The way he ran his hands through his hair when charting, the soft cadence of his voice as he reassured patients, the way the children laughed when he did ridiculous impressions of cartoon characters. He was good, too good, and that terrified her. Adrian sat in the staff office during his short lunch break, staring at the sandwich he hadn't touched. The clinic's overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the dull roar of rain on the roof gave the room an oddly tranquil quality. Still, his stomach churned. It wasn't just Amy, though she was in his thoughts more than he could control. It was the fact that, slowly and surely, Oak Ridge was beginning to feel like home. People smiled at him on the street. Patients asked for him by name. Yesterday, the mailman had left a jar of honey from his own bees on Adrian's porch. And yet, every time he and Amy almost touched, emotionally or otherwise, she pulled away. And he let her, because the last thing he wanted was to become the very kind of doctor she despised. Still, the restraint was getting harder. He stood abruptly, tossing the sandwich and reaching for his white coat. He needed to move. The clinic quieted by late afternoon. The storm had kept people indoors, and only a few emergency walk-ins had trickled in. Amy sat at the front desk, flipping through patient files, when the door opened. "Mrs. Leary," she said, rising with a smile. "Didn't expect to see you today." The elderly woman nodded, clutching a knit shawl close to her chest. "I know, dear. Just need a refill on my heart meds. And I baked something. Thought you and Dr. Cole might enjoy." Amy blinked. "Baked something?" Mrs. Leary handed over a tin wrapped in gingham cloth. "Cherry scones. I've seen the way you two look at each other. Thought you might need a little push." Amy felt her cheeks flame. "Mrs. Leary, You're not fooling anyone, sweetie. But take your time. The good ones are worth a bit of struggle." With a wink, the old woman turned and tottered back into the rain. Amy stared at the tin. Adrian stepped out from the hall at that moment, brow raised. "What's that?" "Trouble," Amy muttered. Then louder. "Cherry scones, from Mrs. Leary." He took a tentative step closer. "She brought them for both of us?" "And gave us a lecture on romance, subtle as a sledgehammer." Their eyes met. Adrian looked amused. Amy, not so much. "Want to split one?" he asked. "Only if you agree we never talk about why." "Deal." They ate in silence, sitting in 2 old chairs by the front window, watching the rain trickle down. It was the closest thing to peace either of them had felt in days. The next day brought a surprise in the form of a new patient, an injured horse farmer named Tom Briggs, who'd caught a rusted nail in his calf. Amy and Adrian worked together to clean and stitch the wound, the tension between them easing as the focus turned to healing. "You two work like clockwork," Tom noted with a grin, despite the pain. "We're just well practiced," Amy replied quickly. Adrian didn't say anything, but he caught her eye briefly and saw the shadow of a smile. Later, as they walked to the break room, Adrian said, "You know, it's okay to let people think what they want." "I know, but sometimes what they want isn't what's best." He stopped walking. "Do you really think this, whatever this is, wouldn't be good?" Amy turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "I think it would be too good, and things that good don't last." He stepped closer. "You don't believe that?" "I do, because every time I've started to trust something like this, it's turned on me." Later that week, Amy's world shifted. Her father, who lived 2 towns over, was admitted to the local hospital with chest pains. She got the call while assisting with a routine physical and left mid-appointment, barely managing to mutter an apology. Adrian watched her drive away, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. He didn't hesitate. He muttered an apology to the staff on duty, left instructions for the on-call nurse, and headed out. He found her in the waiting room of Ridgemont General Hospital, curled in a plastic chair, staring blankly ahead. "Amy." She looked up, startled. Her eyes were red, her posture rigid. "Adrian? What are you doing here?" "You don't have to do this alone." She blinked rapidly, emotions warring in her expression. "He's okay. They're running more tests, but he's stable." He sat beside her. "Still doesn't mean you have to sit here by yourself." "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "You didn't have to come." "I know, but I wanted to." She leaned her head on his shoulder, just for a moment, but that moment cracked the wall. When they returned to Oak Ridge the next day, everything felt different. The clinic was unchanged. The rhythm of patient care continued. But Amy smiled more. Adrian found reasons to pass by her station. They began to share coffee again. Inside, jokes returned. The storm between them didn't break, but it softened. One evening, she found a small wildflower on her desk. A daisy plucked from the edge of the clinic's lot. No note, but she knew, and she didn't throw it away. A week later, the clinic hosted a town QA night about summer health hazards. Adrian was the guest speaker. Amy coordinated the event. She stood at the back of the room while he spoke about tick bites and dehydration. He was confident, warm, engaging. He looked like he belonged here. Someone tapped her shoulder. Mrs. Leary again. "You look happy," the old woman said. Amy hesitated. "I don't know what I am." "Well, whatever it is, it suits you." When Adrian finished, the room erupted in applause. He found her eyes across the crowd, and she smiled. That night, they walked together to their cars. "You were amazing," Amy said. "You organized it. I just talked." "No, you connected. You made people feel like their doctor actually sees them." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, "Would it be too much if I said I think I see you too?" She stopped. "Adrian." He stepped closer. "We can keep pretending, or we can admit what's been happening." She looked down, struggling. "I'm scared." "So am I, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." She looked up, and for once, didn't look away. "Okay. One step at a time," he smiled. "Together." And that night, for the first time, they didn't say goodnight with distance between them. They stood beneath the oak tree outside the clinic, the sky clear and stars bright. And when he leaned in, slowly, giving her every second to stop him, she didn't. Their kiss was tender, hesitant, full of all the things they hadn't said. But in that kiss, Amy felt something she hadn't in years: hope. And Adrian knew, without question, that he'd found the one place he'd been looking for all along. Chapter 4. Oak Ridge basked under the mellow gold of early autumn. The trees had begun their slow undressing, russet and ochre leaves spinning in wind-drawn spirals along the clinic's gravel lot. The summer had faded with barely a whisper, leaving a tenderness in the air that echoed the changes stirring between Adrian and Amy. It had been a month since their kiss beneath the oak tree. They hadn't spoken of it since, but everything had changed. He brought her coffee every morning now, always just the way she liked it. She left notes on his charts, not just clinical corrections, but gentle reminders in her looping script. "Don't forget to smile at Mrs. Donnelly, she just lost her cat." Or, "Milo's afraid of needles, start with a joke." They worked in tandem, laughed more, touched more, Always casually, always briefly. A hand on a shoulder, a nudge of the elbow, a brush of fingers, but never more. Not yet. "You're glowing," Gina teased one morning, nudging Amy with her hip as they stood over the supply inventory. "It's the fluorescent lighting." "It's the doctor." Amy rolled her eyes. We're getting along, that's all." "Uh-huh. And I get along great with my landlord, but I don't look like I'm waiting for him to walk through the door every 5 minutes." Amy bit her lip. Gina softened. "He's not like the others, Amy. That's what scares me." Gina leaned on the counter, serious now. "You've been carrying the weight of everyone else for so long. Maybe it's okay to let someone carry a little of you." Amy stared down at the checklist, the numbers blurring. She wanted that. God, she wanted that. Adrian, meanwhile, was battling his own ghosts. Late one afternoon, he sat alone in his office and decided to do some work on his laptop. While sifting through his emails, a name stopped him cold. Natalie Rivers. He opened the email with a knot in his chest. It was short. "Hey, I heard from one of the nurses you transferred. Just wanted to say I'm glad you found somewhere new. I hope you're okay. No apology, no bitterness, just unfinished business." He sat back in his chair, the memory of their final fight sharp in his mind. How she'd accused him of never letting her in. How he'd told her she used her job as an excuse to avoid real connection. How they had both been right. He didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he found himself thinking about Amy. About how she never pushed, never demanded. How she saw people for who they were, not who she wanted them to be. How he hadn't told her about Natalie. He stood pacing the room, the guilt thickening. He wanted to be honest with Amy. Needed to be. But every time he got close, the fear returned. What if she pulled away? What if he ruined the only thing that had felt real in years? That Friday, they were scheduled for a community health outreach event at the Oak Ridge Fall Fair. The entire clinic was volunteering. Vaccinations, checkups, health screenings under a white tent between the cider stand and the pumpkin patch. Amy wore a cozy blue flannel, her hair pulled into a loose braid. Adrian arrived in a soft gray sweater, the sleeves pushed to his elbows. They looked, someone joked, like a couple from a lifestyle blog. They shared a glance and a laugh, but beneath it, something twisted in Amy's chest. She was falling. Fast. And it scared her senseless. They worked side by side for hours, exchanging quiet jokes between patients. Children clung to their parents, wincing at flu shots. Seniors offered pies in exchange for blood pressure checks. The whole town buzzed with warmth. In the lull between patients, Amy handed Adrian a slice of apple pie on a paper plate. "You're winning hearts fast," she said. "Only because I've got the town's favorite nurse backing me up." She rolled her eyes. "Flattery? From you?" "It's not flattery if it's true." There was a beat. A pause too heavy to be casual. Amy looked away first. "I need to check on Mrs. Hendricks." She walked off before he could respond. The rain returned that night after the fair ended, a soft drizzle that painted the streets in watery reflections. Adrian stayed late to help pack the medical supplies, insisting Amy go home first. She didn't. Instead, she sat in her car, watching him through the windshield, her hands gripping the steering wheel. When he finally emerged, carrying the last box, she stepped out into the rain. He paused. "Thought you left." "I couldn't." He set the box down, the air charged between them. "Adrian," she said softly, "we need to talk." He nodded. "I know." They stood under the tent awning, the rain a whisper around them. "You've been different lately," she said. "So have you." She exhaled. Whatever this is, it's real." And I think we've both been pretending it isn't.
Because we're afraid.
She looked at him, eyes fierce. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of me. Of how much I want this to work. Adrian stepped closer. Then let's stop pretending. Even if it's messy? Especially if it's messy. He reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. I have something to tell you, he said. She stilled. There was someone before. A nurse. We were serious. And it ended badly. I told myself I'd never go down that road again. I figured as much. He blinked. You did? She gave a sad smile. You flinched every time I stood too close for the first month. He winced. I'm sorry. I'm not mad. I just need to know that you're here, really here, not just escaping a past. I am, and I'm not running anymore, not from this. She searched his face, then stepped into his arms. The hug wasn't passionate. It wasn't dramatic. It was everything. Warmth, safety, a silent promise. That weekend, they shared their first real date, though neither of them called it that. They drove out to Willow Lake, packed sandwiches and a thermos of coffee, and sat by the shore under a sky scattered with leaves and late sun. Adrian skipped rocks. Amy read aloud from a book of poetry. They talked about everything except the clinic, and it felt like breathing after months underwater. When he kissed her again, it was gentle, unhurried. A deepening, not a beginning. Later, they lay back in the grass, fingers entwined. You still scared? He asked. Yeah, but not enough to stop. Good, because I'm all in. She turned her face to his. Then let's see where this goes. The next few weeks passed in golden blurs. Work, coffee, kisses behind closed doors, whispered jokes, shared silences, little things that stitched them closer together. But no love story is without its shadow. One evening, after clinic hours, Amy sat in the break room going through insurance claims. Adrian walked in, holding his phone like it had burned him. Natalie messaged again. Amy looked up slowly. What did she say? That she missed me, that she made a mistake. Amy's face closed like a book. And? He crossed the room, sat beside her. And I deleted it. You didn't want to reply? He took her hand. I'm not in that chapter anymore. She studied him. Then why did you tell me? Because I want you to trust me. Because I've been the guy who hides things. I won't be that man again. She leaned against him. You're not. As October deepened, they both found themselves on steadier ground. But Amy knew deep down that there was still one more thing she hadn't said. One wound she hadn't revealed. And until she did, the future they were building would rest on uneven soil. But she would tell him. Soon. Because for the first time in years, she believed in something she'd almost forgotten. Love would find a way. Chapter 5. Oak Ridge began preparing for winter early. By mid-November, the leaves were a memory, the fields lay bare, and the air turned sharper each day. In the clinic, heaters hummed, sweaters returned, and patients trickled in with colds, creaky joints, and stories of snow already dusting the hilltops. Adrian and Amy, though closer than ever, moved through a quiet tension. It wasn't spoken, but it lingered, like mist on the morning hills. It wasn't doubt. It was waiting. Amy had promised herself she'd tell him about the doctor and her past, about the night that changed her, about the reasons she'd built her armor, and why letting him in wasn't just hard, it was terrifying. But the words clung to her ribs, until the day she couldn't hold them in. It started like any other Wednesday. Amy and Adrian reviewed a case together, a middle-aged man with erratic blood sugar, and discussed treatment adjustments. Their shoulders brushed. Their conversation flicked between professional and playful. "You're really good at this," Adrian said, glancing at her notes. "Don't sound so surprised," she teased. He smiled. "I'm not. You always think of the person first, not just the problem." She looked at him. A long, steady look. "Want to grab dinner tonight?" she asked. He blinked. "Yes," she nodded. "Your place." He made lentil soup and toasted sourdough. Amy brought apple cider and nerves. The moment he opened the door, he knew something was different. She didn't kiss him. She didn't smile wide. She stood there, eyes a little too bright. He let her in, took her coat, tried to ignore the pounding in his chest. Dinner was quiet. Not uncomfortable, but not easy either. Finally, as they cleared dishes, Amy turned to him. "I need to tell you something." He set the plate down gently. "Okay." She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "It was 5 years ago, my first job out of school. I was greener than spring grass and trying too hard to prove myself." Adrian said nothing, just listened. He was a doctor, older, respected, charming, and I was flattered he noticed me. We started seeing each other quietly. At first it was sweet. Secret smiles, long talks, coffee breaks together. She paused. But he changed, got possessive, cold, critical. Told me I was just a nurse, that I should be grateful someone like him wanted me. Adrian's jaw tightened. One day, he snapped at me in front of a patient, accused me of undermining him. I reported it, and suddenly, I was the problem. She closed her eyes. I left. I didn't want to leave nursing, but I almost did. I came here to start over, to forget. But I didn't forget. I made a rule: never date a doctor, never give them the chance to make me feel small again. Adrian reached for her hand. "Amy." "Wait," she said. "You've never done that. Not once. But I need you to know why I flinched at first. Why I kept pushing you away even when I wanted nothing more than to fall into you." She met his gaze. "You scare me, because you make me hope again." Adrian stepped closer, his voice quiet. "I would never ask you to forget, but I hope someday you'll let this feel safe." She took a shaky breath. "I think I already have." They stood in silence, the kind that settles when something heavy has been laid down at last. Then she leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her. From that night on, their relationship deepened, no longer a quiet current, but a river flowing strong and true. They still worked side by side, still shared knowing glances across patient files, but now there was no hesitation. In the evenings, he'd read aloud while she baked. She told him stories of Oak Ridge's quirks, and he told her about the city, the noise, the pace, the loneliness he never realized he felt until he left it. They fit, imperfectly, beautifully, but not everyone was ready for change. One morning, just after Thanksgiving, the clinic's director, Evelyn Marks, called Amy into her office. "I've been hearing whispers," Evelyn said, fingers steepled. Amy sat straighter. "About what?" "About you and Dr. Hale." Amy froze. "I'm not accusing you of anything inappropriate," Evelyn continued. "But in small towns, optics matter. People talk. So we should pretend nothing's happening?" Evelyn's eyes softened. "No, but be mindful. You're both professionals, and the clinic depends on trust." Amy nodded tightly. "Understood." She left the office with clenched fists. Not because Evelyn was wrong, but because the past had returned in a new shape. Adrian noticed her tension immediately. "What happened?" She told him. He exhaled. "So what do we do?" "We keep being us, but carefully." He reached out, touching her hand. "I'd walk through fire for you, but I'll take small steps if that's what you need." That winter brought its own trials. A spike in flu cases left them both exhausted. One weekend, a snowstorm stranded them at the clinic overnight with 2 patients too sick to risk moving. Amy made up cots in the recovery room. Adrian brewed stale coffee. They worked through the night, checking vitals, sharing blankets, whispering under emergency lights. At dawn, when the storm began to ease, Amy found Adrian dozing against the wall, his head resting on her shoulder. She kissed his forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." Later that week, during a staff meeting, Evelyn announced Adrian would be taking over as the clinic's medical lead while she took a 6-month sabbatical. Amy's heart thudded. He met her eyes. They both knew what it meant. More eyes, more judgment, more risk. They had their first real fight 2 days later. It wasn't about work. Not really. It was about distance. "You're pulling away," Adrian said, standing by the window of her apartment. Amy wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm just tired." "That's not it. You haven't let me stay the night in over a week. You don't text me back half the time." "Because everyone's watching. Because I don't want to be the nurse who slept her way into special treatment." "Do you really think I'd let anyone believe that?" "It doesn't matter what you believe. It's what they'll say." He stepped forward. "I don't care what they say. I care about us." "I know you do, and I love that. But I have to live here. I have to walk these streets long after you're gone." That stopped him cold. "You think I'll leave?" She looked down. He crossed the room, took her face in his hands. "I'm not going anywhere, Amy. Not unless you want me to." Tears welled up. "I'm scared to want forever with you." He kissed her, slow and sure. "Then let's want it one day at a time." As December waned, so did the distance. They started taking small, deliberate steps. They kept their affection mostly private. They kept their professionalism absolute. But love, as always, found ways to bloom. One snowy evening, after a long shift, they walked home hand in hand. "One more chapter," Amy said, her breath misting in the cold. "Of what?" "Us. Before the new year. Before everything changes again." He pulled her close. "Whatever's ahead, we'll face it together." And in the hush of a sleeping town, under lamplight and stars, she believed him. Because some love doesn't crash in. It roots. It builds. It stays. Chapter 6. New Year's Day dawned crisp and clear over Oak Ridge, snow crunching underfoot and chimneys breathing warmth into the winter sky. The town was quiet, recovering from its celebrations, while the clinic remained on skeleton staff. Amy arrived early, as usual. Adrian joined not long after, brushing snow from his coat and offering her a smile that was more than just a greeting. It was a promise. Their shift passed in calm. A few post-holiday flus, a child with a mild sprain from a sledding mishap, an elderly couple in for their routine blood pressure checks. The town was sleepy, peaceful. And then, in the lull before lunch, a woman's voice echoed through the clinic doors. "Adrian?" Adrian looked up, and the color drained from his face. Standing there, looking windblown but still composed, was Natalie, the nurse from his past, the woman who had broken his trust, and with it, the resolve he'd once carried into Oak Ridge. Amy saw the recognition in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. I didn't think I'd actually find you," Natalie said. "What are you doing here?" Adrian asked, his voice low. Natalie glanced at Amy, offering a polite nod. "I'm not here to make trouble. I needed to say I was sorry." Amy's heart thudded, but she remained still, watching. "Would you mind if we spoke privately?" Natalie asked. Adrian hesitated, then turned to Amy. "I'll be right back." He led Natalie into the break room and closed the door behind them. The moment they were alone, Natalie's composed expression shifted to something more desperate. "Adrian, I know this is unexpected, but I've had time to think, to reflect, and I made a mistake, leaving you." He crossed his arms, wary. "You didn't just leave. You tore me down on your way out." "I was scared, of how real it felt, of how fast we were moving. I thought I wanted space, freedom, but none of it mattered, not like you did." Adrian took a step back. His heart pounded, not with longing, but with the fear that Amy might overhear, or worse, misunderstand. "Natalie, this isn't the time or place." "I came all this way," she said, stepping closer, "to tell you that I still love you, that maybe we could try again." "No." The word hung in the air like a snapped wire. "I'm with someone else. Someone who knows what it means to stand beside me, not above or beneath. Someone I love." Natalie's expression hardened. "Her? The nurse out front?" "Don't," he said, his voice sharp. "Don't belittle her. Not when she's everything I didn't know I needed." Natalie's eyes flashed. "So that's it then? I come all this way to bare my heart and you throw me out?" "I didn't ask you to come," he said evenly. "And if this is about making peace with your past, fine. But if you thought you could come back into my life and change everything, no. That part of us is over." She stared at him, trembling. Then, with a toss of her coat over her arm, she stormed past him and out the break room door. Adrian followed her into the hallway. Amy stood a few steps away, pretending to organize files. Her eyes met his. Natalie looked at Amy once more, then muttered, "Good luck," before pushing the door open and vanishing into the snowy afternoon. Adrian approached Amy, heart in his throat. "She's gone," I gathered. He waited. "She wanted to get back together," Amy said, looking up. "Didn't she?" He nodded. "I told her no. Told her I was with someone who mattered more than anything." Amy studied his face, searching. "Okay," she said at last. "Let's get back to work." Relief flooded him. But so did something else, deeper certainty. That no matter what came to test them, he'd choose her, every time. That night, Adrian cooked dinner at Amy's place. They listened to jazz, shared a bottle of wine, and let silence fall easily between them. Amy watched him as he stirred the pasta. "You're really staying," she said. He turned, brow raised. "You still don't believe me?" She smiled. "I want to." "Then believe this. I'm signing a lease on the cottage near the ridge tomorrow. I've already spoken to Evelyn about making my position permanent." Her eyes widened. "You were going to surprise me." "Only if you said yes when I asked this." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple box. Not velvet, not flashy, just right. Amy's breath caught. He opened it, not to reveal a ring, but a key. "To the cottage, a spare, in case you ever want to come by or stay or move in. One day." Tears sprang unbidden. Happy, stunned tears. "This isn't a proposal," Adrian added quickly. "Not yet, but it's everything leading to one. If you want it." She took the key, held it like it was sacred. "I want it." He kissed her, slow and sweet. Spring returned to Oak Ridge in fits and starts. Crocuses pushed through melting snow. The town shook off its wintry hush. And in the heart of the clinic, Amy and Adrian moved like twin constellations, close, steady, always in orbit. They faced moments of friction. Some of the older patients still made comments. A few staff members seemed wary at first. But Amy's dedication and Adrian's unwavering respect for her role slowly changed minds. They built trust, together. One afternoon, after a long day, Amy sat on the porch of the Ridge cottage, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. Adrian joined her, resting a hand on her knee. "You ever think," he asked, "that if we'd met anywhere else, this might not have worked?" She nodded. We both needed this place. These hills. The quiet. "And each other," she smiled. "Even if we tried not to." He chuckled. "We really did. Guess love doesn't care about rules. Or professions. Or past mistakes." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Love will find a way." He kissed the top of her head. "It always does." Months later, as summer painted the countryside in gold and green, Amy stood before a small group of community members at a health fair the clinic had organized. Adrian was beside her, speaking about preventative care. She followed with a talk about compassion in medicine. Together, they answered questions, laughed with the crowd, and gave the kind of care Oak Ridge had never seen before. Later, walking hand in hand down the gravel path from the community center, Amy looked up at him. "Remember when we tried to keep our distance?" "I remember every agonizing second." "Was it worth the wait?" He grinned. "Every one." And in that quiet country town, beneath the wide blue sky, two people who once built walls around their hearts walked forward, not perfectly, but honestly, together, because love, real love, doesn't just find a way, it chooses one.